First, it's time to do some prep work. Separate the egg whites from yolks and allow the egg whites to come to room temperature. This step is important if you're making Italian or French meringue. Next, measure out all of your dry ingredients using a kitchen scale. Then sift the almond flour and confectioner's sugar together using a mesh strainer. If you find that your almond flour is especially lumpy, you can double sift these ingredients. Use a silicone spatula or a spoon to help with this process. Then you can discard any larger bits of almond flour that you can't force through. Next, wipe down your mixing bowl and your whisk attachment with some white vinegar on a paper towel. This helps to remove any excess oils that could hinder your meringue. Grab a light-colored sheet tray and layer your baking mat on top. This could be parchment paper, a silicone mat, or a Teflon mat. Next, we're going to prepare our piping bag. You can use a 1/2-inch round tip or something a little smaller. Place the piping tip inside the bag and then push part of the side of the piping bag into the piping tip to ensure that nothing leaks out. Set the bag inside a tall glass and pull the remaining top of the piping bag out over the outside of the glass to make pouring the batter easy and clean. Now it's time to make our meringue, starting with French meringue. If you choose this method of meringue, pour in your egg whites into the stand mixer bowl fitted with a whisk attachment along with cream of tartar. Turn your mixer onto medium-low speed, around 4 on a KitchenAid mixer, and allow the eggs to beat until they are very foamy. At this point, grab your granulated sugar, and you're going to add in a small amount of granulated sugar. I usually like to add mine in about 3 or 4 batches. Once you add a little bit of your granulated sugar, allow the mixer to beat in each batch for about 45 seconds before adding in an additional batch. Once all of the granulated sugar is incorporated, turn the mixer speed to medium-high, which is about a speed 8 on my KitchenAid mixer, and allow the egg whites to continue to whip until stiff peaks form. Your meringue will go through a couple different stages, first arriving at soft peaks. Here, it will be very flimsy and weak. Next, you'll get to medium peaks, which is a little bit stiffer, but it still needs to keep whipping until we get to a solid, stiff peak stage. Once you arrive at stiff peaks, you'll notice that the meringue starts to ball up inside the whisk and is very glossy. To test the meringue stiffness, pull out the whisk. A stiff peak should stand straight up, no curl at the tip. You'll also notice these little pointy offshoots of egg whites throughout the meringue. You'll also know it's ready because you can fully flip over the bowl and nothing falls out or moves. Okay, next I'm going to show you Italian meringue. For this method of meringue, you'll divide your egg whites in half and place one in a mixing bowl and one in your stand mixer bowl. To the stand mixer bowl, you'll add the cream of tartar. Next, allow the egg whites in the stand mixer bowl to whip on a medium-low speed until the eggs become very frothy. I use speed 4 on my KitchenAid mixer. While the egg whites are mixing, we're going to sift our almond flour and confectioner's sugar into the other set of egg whites. Then mix the egg whites with these dry ingredients until a paste forms. We won't be using the paste for a bit, so we'll cover it with plastic wrap so it doesn't dry out. Meanwhile, the eggs still need a little longer to continue whipping, so we're going to work on the hot sugar syrup. Add granulated sugar and water to a small saucepan. This sugar syrup is what sets Italian meringue apart from the other types of meringue. We're going to cook this mixture over a medium-high heat until the sugar reaches 244 degrees Fahrenheit or 118 degrees Celsius on an instant read thermometer. The goal is to dissolve the sugar and create a thick and stable sugar syrup. While the sugar is dissolving in the water, don't move the pan too much or the sugar could crystallize. Once the sugar is mostly dissolved, however, you can lightly swirl the pan to help the remaining sugar dissolve. At this point, the egg whites are very thick. However, if they thicken before the sugar syrup is ready, you can turn the mixer speed to low, but don't turn it off completely. Once the sugar syrup is ready, turn the mixer speed to medium-high, around 8 on a KitchenAid. Then slowly pour the sugar syrup down the side of the mixer bowl. Be sure the sugar runs down the bowl and doesn't hit the whisk attachment or it will splatter on the side of the mixing bowl. Continue to whip the egg whites on medium-high speed until stiff peaks form. You can also optionally add in food coloring during this whipping process. The meringue will go through the same soft peak and medium peak stages before they arrive at these stiff peaks for Italian meringue. The meringue should also have a thick texture that you can check by hand whisking. Now we'll fold in the stiff peak meringue into the almond paste mixture just until everything is combined. It can seem a little hard to mix these two mixtures together, but if you have a little patience, they will come together. Finally, let's move on to Swiss meringue. You'll need to find a saucepan that's small enough that you can rest your stand mixer bowl on it. Once you've found a pan that will work, fill the saucepan partway with water. You don't want the water to go too high in the saucepan. We're just using the steam from the water, so make sure the water will not touch the bottom of the stand mixer bowl once it's boiling. Next, add the egg whites, granulated sugar, and cream of tartar to the stand mixer bowl and whisk together. Once the water is boiling, reduce the heat to medium-high so we can ensure that the boiling water doesn't become too aggressive and start boiling high enough to touch the stand mixer bowl. Place the stand mixer bowl on top of the water to create a bain-marie or double boiler. Whisk the egg mixture, stirring constantly until the mixture reaches 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 38 degrees Celsius on an instant read thermometer. This is a quick process, around 30 seconds to 1 minute. The goal of this process is to dissolve the sugar, which you can actually double check that you've done correctly by pinching it in between your fingers to see if you feel any sugar granules. Once it's done, carefully remove the hot bowl from the heat and transfer it over to the stand mixer. Turn your mixer on medium-high speed. For my KitchenAid, this is a speed 8. You'll notice that the egg whites will very quickly start to become opaque. You'll want to continue whipping this mixture again until it reaches stiff peaks. You can add in the food dye as well during this process. You'll slowly see the meringue transform from soft peak to medium peak to finally stiff peaks. As you see indentations in the meringue from the whisk, and you see the meringue balling up inside the whisk, you'll know that you're ready to check for these stiff peaks. Remember, you can also test the resistance of the meringue to make sure it's thick by hand whisking it. Next, we're moving on to the macaronage process. For French and Swiss meringue, this means that you'll need to add the sifted almond flour and confectioner's sugar into the meringue mixture and gently fold them together using a silicone spatula. You'll want to continue to mix until all of the meringue is fully incorporated and there are no dry bits of almond flour at the bottom of the bowl. You can also optionally add in your food dye here as well. Next, it's time to macaronage the batter. The goal of this process is to combine the dry ingredients with the meringue, as well as remove some of the air out of the batter so that it easily pipes when we're making the macaron shells. To macaronage, slowly spread the mixture along the side of the bowl and then wipe it back down. Be sure to do this kind of gently. Repeat until the mixture has reached a smooth, shiny, and flowy consistency. You'll want to check every time that you swipe the batter and then wipe it back down to see what kind of consistency you currently have. Here's an example of under macaronage batter that is still too thick. On the other hand, here's an example of perfectly macaronaged batter. It's looking more like lava, and when the batter drops back into the bowl, it should take about 10 seconds for that ribbon to disappear into the rest of the batter. Here's an example of over macaronaged batter that was mixed too much. It's too thin and immediately disappears back into the rest of the batter. With your perfectly macaronaged batter, you'll pour that into the prepared piping bag. You can see just how clean and easy everything is. Next, grab your sheet tray and hold the piping bag vertically and pipe 1.5-inch circles. If your baking mat doesn't already have a built-in template, you can use a printable template like this one. Once you've reached your desired size of macaron, release the pressure on the bag and twist your wrist without lifting up. You can continue this process until you run out of batter. Bang the sheet tray down on the counter a few times to release any air bubbles that may have formed during the piping process. You can pop any large air bubbles with a toothpick so they don't explode when baked. Next, preheat your oven. You'll want to use an oven thermometer to ensure it's properly heating to the right temperature. Move the oven racks to the center of the oven and then select your desired baking temperature. Allow the batter to sit on the counter and dry until a thin skin develops and you can touch the tops without ruining the macarons. This resting time will vary depending on your climate. Once the macarons are dried and your oven is preheated, place the macarons into the oven to bake. You'll know they're fully baked because the feet and the edge of the macaron should feel firm when you gently touch them. Additionally, the batter doesn't look sticky or wet. They should come out of the oven with a firm top, feet that have a slight vertical raise, and the interior of the shell should be full. Next, pipe your desired filling onto one side of the macaron shell. Then gently place the matching shell on top of the filling. Mature the macarons with the filling in the refrigerator overnight. This will allow the macarons to slightly soften and develop a deeper flavor.